Hi, our guest today is Selectman Bill Buckley, who is Chairman of the Board of Selectmen and wants to outline his goals and objectives for the coming year. Bill, welcome.
Welcome. Yeah, thank you very much. Good to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
So at a recent board meeting, you outlined 4 main goals for your year as chairman.
I did.
Would you like to go into them?
Well, I think it's important to see if we can connect with the Baker administration on a couple of things. They're working on best practices, community compacts. So there's a couple areas I think that Milford could benefit from. One of them is from an IT perspective, how's our IT security?
Right.
We do a lot of things for a lot of people, and we record a lot of data. Some of that data is transaction information to banks, where we do automatic deposit. Some of that information could be personal health information for employees and
Social
insurance.
security numbers.
Yeah, Social Security numbers. We have a great deal of information. I'm concerned about our IT security, certainly in light of a lot of things that happen with, hacks into hospitals, hacks into government agencies. So I think it's important to focus on that, protect our employee information and our public information, because we also do transactions directly to banks for taxes. So that's one of the things. So I think we could benefit from some of the best practices that exist across the state.
Is that the Community Compact program?
That is. It's a program that the Baker administration, led by Lieutenant Governor Karen Polito, has organized. And what it allows us to do in some areas is share our best practices where we have them.
She was actually in town recently at the Milford Area Chamber of Commerce annual meeting.
Right.
And she also noted that communities that belong to the Community Compact are eligible for more grants.
Right. They're eligible and awarded greater points.
Right.
For receiving grants from the state. So I think it's opportunity to reduce burden on the taxpayer, but at the same time share our best practices and receive best practices. So that was one of the compacts.
Right.
An additional compact was looking into what they've done and where communities have public transportation. I envision down the road public transportation in Milford, and getting on board with the compacts allows us to see what mistakes have been made, what improvements are made, what some of the best practices are, and maybe go through that learning curve a little bit faster than you might if you just took it upon yourself to just delve into it. So that was another area of importance for me. So besides IT security, certainly public transportation, I'd like to see that go forward. It depends what town meeting votes next month. Then there's an area that I think we can improve is the IDC as an example, a third area of focus that I mentioned at the first meeting.
The Industrial Development Commission.
Yeah, the Industrial Development Commission.
And they recently sort of reorganized themselves, probably using air cover from you saying that's one of your goals.
Yeah, I think
they reorganized themselves and have a good, strong, I would say citizen-led chair and vice chair.
Right, I certainly think there's linkage between that goal and that reorganization. I think they understood that there are things they can do to improve. There are things that the board can do to energize them. We can look at, again, best practices across the state and different communities we may want to benchmark. So what I've talked about is funded initiative-based funding, where we may be able to help them out to do that, because you can't do anything without funds, even benchmarking, even surveys take some sort of funds. So,
So in other words, if they came to you, the Board of Selectmen, and said, would like to look at this project, you'd be inclined to say, if they had done some benchmarking, you'd be inclined to support funding it to get it going.
Right, if it makes sense, if it's the right type of effort. We're talking about a group whose sole purpose in life, by statute and by their own charter, is to help industrial and commercial development within the community, energize it, see where there are opportunities within the community. And we know that no community is vibrant without a strong industrial and commercial tax base. So I think there's things that we can do. We hear about it from citizens frequently. Main Street is a component of that, but it's just a component. It exists throughout the community. So those are the real major initiatives that I'd like to see carried through. I'd like to see us make some progress on those, and kind of empower boards and groups to become part of that best practice. When you look at things and read things like Good to Great, right? It talks about getting the right people on the bus, getting the wrong people off the bus,
Right.
and making sure everybody on the bus is in the right seats.
Well, I know, you've worked for larger corporations, so you certainly understand that, a wrong hire at a certain level can cripple a company's effort for 3 or 4 years. Much the same as like drafting the wrong player or not drafting the right player, shows up at a sports team 5 years from now.
Right.
If only when Len Bias died. That actually hurt the Celtics for like 5 years into the future.
Right, that's a good example.
And not getting the right component or the right person in. Now, you must be happy with the way the town's finances reviewed by Moody's investment group for the Woodland School bond that just went out. I mean, keeping a AA2 rating and, having no problem floating $28 million of
That's a good thing.
That's a great thing.
municipal bonds.
Yeah, we get, periodically, we get independent third-party reviews of our finances. And it's one thing to be, to look inward and to constantly review our own spreadsheets, look at where we are relative to, taxes, relative to where we are to savings. But it's an entirely different thing when you get that third-party review. That third-party review, in some sense, is an affirmation that we're doing a lot of the things right, and what we ought to keep doing well. I think they highlighted a lot of great things about our finances, our independence in terms of our ability to finance large projects with our
Without an
stabilization.
override.
Yeah, that's a great point. Not having override or debt exclusion ever in this community is a significant thing to be able to do.
Zach Taylor, the finance director, and I were having a chat earlier today, and he just mentioned in the 6 years he's been here, you haven't touched the stabilization fund, but you've $5 million youth center renovations cash, $2.5 million Godfrey Brook repairs cash.
Right.
I don't think other towns can say that.
No, none can say that.
No, and a lot of that is a result of that dual tax rate, which creates in many respects a burden on the businesses. So there's the tax rate that's 1.5 times what a residential tax rate is, and then there's also the influx of state aid, which for me, even the name state aid is a misnomer. It's funds returned to Milford
Right.
taxpayers that were provided by Milford taxpayers.
Right.
So, it's state returning money that was doled out by great things happening in Milford, taxpayers paying their taxes, businesses paying their taxes, and revenue being generated.
I wonder if they'd ever be able to calculate and have the Department of Revenue say, this is what we got from all the individuals and all the businesses in your town, and you could compare that figure
To what
with the
you get
state
back.
aid
To
return.
what you get back,
Yeah.
right?
And see how much you actually get back.
Please send us money so we can skim off about 60% of it,
Yeah.
and then we'll send some back to you.
We know Boston collects their fair share of everywhere else in Western Mass, and, so, yeah.
Yeah, only in Massachusetts do the people driving east-west on the Pike pay for the north-south big dig.
That's correct.
I love that one, but then again, I also remember that the excise tax on cars was temporary and supposed to go away after World War II.
Yeah, you could list.
Duh.
You could go on and talk about things that were supposed to have been temporary that, politicians in their infinite wisdom had thought about ahead of time and said, we'll do this temporarily, only to have that promise reneged upon, and
Oh, it stays there.
it stays
It
there
stays
forever.
there, yeah.
So that's why I think that's why citizens are mindful and concerned sometimes when they hear somebody talking about a temporary this or a temporary that, because they know it'll be there forever.
It'll be there. Once you get it, you keep it.
Well, I mean, going back to the bond, but the good news is, and then it depends on what you guys do with it. But what Zach Taylor told me today is of course, you had figured the cost of paying that off at a certain level, and that was put into the fiscal 17 proposed budget.
That's correct.
Since it came in lower, there's now $500,000 more. I don't want to say available to spend, available to allocate, whether it be to reduce property
Right.
taxes or pay for something capital. Nonetheless, you know, other towns would kill to have $500,000 suddenly freed up.
Yeah, and you know, as you know, both of you have been selectmen, you know that the list for municipalities and things to do and projects that need to be done is infinite, right?
Yes.
It goes on and on. So, you know, the types of things that you might list in Milford are, certainly you've mentioned it, you know, brook repairs, we talk about road repairs, basic infrastructure. We're constantly with a number of municipal buildings doing projects such as roofs, boilers, you know, handrails and
There's
different
no
things
end
to
to
keep
it.
people safe.
Absolutely no end to it.
Well, and you know, there's no end to it on the municipal side, and when, as homeowners, we know there's no end to it in our homes.
But
right?
it's either keep up with it or face a, you know, let's
Major.
use the Armory for an example. Nobody put money into that building since the 1913 or whatever it was. $5 million to bring it up. If that had been done gradually every year or kept it going, the bill wouldn't have been that big.
Right, right.
Well, it also is being remodeled to
Yes.
some extent. So that has a major impact on it because its usage is being changed,
But
which
how
is not a bad thing. It's
but
a
how many-
great
I
thing.
mean, the point is though, Al, how many towns in the area could sustain $5 million in renovations cash
Absolutely.
over 3 years
Absolutely
of paying
none.
for it?
Oh, yeah.
The dilemma that the country faces is that we haven't, as a country, invested in infrastructure.
You're right.
And as a result, the bill gets larger and larger. If we did it on a gradual basis, it wouldn't be so big. But now we've reached a point where bridges and dams and you name it are in crisis condition. I mean, it's a scary time, and we're going to have to do those kind of things.
Or you have idiotic things like what you're dealing with in Upton with Milford. You have the little bridge on Fisk Mill Road that needs to be replaced. And the bridge is 21 feet wide. And the state has a program where they'll pay for small bridges up to 20 feet wide.
Right.
And because it's over 20 feet wide, they want sidewalks
On both sides.
on both sides, which pushes the cost of this bridge up to some absurd figure I heard of, you know, in the multi-millions.
Right.
When in reality, normally what you would have done 50 years ago is close the road, put a new culvert pipe in,
And call
retar
it
it,
good,
and
and
leave.
call it- Well, I mean, when I was a selectman, we had the same problem with a dam. A dam, we looked at it and said, gee, we got to do something. Well, one day it started to leak significantly, so we didn't have a choice.
Right.
We had to fix the dam. No, there's no doubt about it. And if you don't anticipate those things and predict them and plan for them, all of a sudden the costs go through the ceiling because the engineer comes in and goes, oh, I got these guys now.
Yeah, the consultants win big when you let something deteriorate. I think Milford went through that period in the 80s where they let some of their
a lot of buildings.
capital buildings and infrastructure get to a point where suddenly we were forced to do something. And I think now that we're looking at it more proactively, I think we're in a much better place.
Well, a lot of people don't realize it, and being in corporate America, and all of us have been in corporate America, most people don't realize the least you ever spend on anything is what you pay for it.
Right.
Where the money is the ownership, the cost of ownership of that facility or whatever it is. And that's essentially what's happened. The good news is, and I think it speaks very well at Milford, is that you guys have inadvertently or planned or whatever, but you've got the revenue and you have the resources and the bucket of money to go to and say, we can fix it.
I think it all goes back to the days when Jack Davern was the Speaker of the House and they were drawing up where 495 would go. And as legend has it, there was one exit. And he put his finger on the map and drew it a little curve to get the second exit and said, now we'll support it. That's the legend.
Is that right? I
But
don't know.
whatever, that's how
Yeah.
Milford has the two exits. You have Fortune Boulevard.
Right.
I mean, the folks from the Metro West Regional Transit are saying people from other towns don't want to go to Framingham to shop. They want to rather do it in Milford.
Well, I also think it's, one thing is, certainly by location, we're in a great spot.
And
Right,
population.
we're on 495. We have 2 exits, as you mentioned. But, you know, when you look beyond that, you know, communities, companies can spend away money pretty quick, thinking they're rich and thinking that there's no end in sight, not being prepared for economic downturn,
Right.
not being prepared for, you know, the foreclosure rate has been phenomenal in all communities surrounding us.
But the town doesn't do that.
No, the town is very conservative, and by its process is very tough on itself. You know, people will say politics in Milford is a contact sport. I can attest to that, and I think anybody that's ever run for office will let you know that we're hard on ourselves first, and then we'll go out and do our business.
Well, speaking of contact sport, you spent most of you've been on what, 11 years now on the board?
11, yeah.
You
Wow.
spent, I would say, 10 of those years. You were, on some issues, a minority member.
Sure.
In the last year, since Will Kincaid got elected, you're more a majority now, because you two tend to think alike on certain issues.
Yeah.
Not all issues, but
No,
some
no,
issues.
and it's. I guess it's less thinking alike any more than Dino and Brian were always thinking alike. I think you come at it from certain perspectives, and so you can see it's probably easier to see the other perspective, the other person's perspective. You know, but you're right. There were an awful lot of 2-to-1 votes in areas of real philosophical differences. You know, I was fortunate during that time to be able to navigate through that process, still try to have influence in the process, and try to steer it slightly to the best of my ability, right, as a minority member, as you say. But lately, you know, with the change in the board, as members change, I think, you know, you reach out to new people and you talk about differences, you talk about areas of agreement, you think about things, maybe if you think about things in a similar way, you have a different basis. We're also...
But yet you've been roughed up for the fact that you and Will are voting differently than the third member.
Well,
You can get, in a certain meeting, you've been roughed up a lot lately, like you're doing something out of the ordinary.
Yeah, that's more the radio, and I think everybody's pretty clear in Milford about the relationship between Brian and Ed Thompson. That's not news. That's not a flash to anybody. So they tend to
But
carry
yet at
each
this
other's
week's
water.
board meeting, you put forward a way to hire the new town engineer. Brian disagreed with part of it. You just said, yeah, fine, whatever you want.
Yeah, let's modify it.
Let's get it
Let's
done.
seek consensus and let's move on.
well,
Sure.
what you do
So
is
I don't get the criticism sometimes.
well,
Andrew.
you
I
fight
honestly don't.
You fight the battles that are important,
Right.
and you say, okay, this isn't a battle I want to be involved in.
Yeah. Whereas the casino, you were out there for a long time by yourself saying, I'm not for this no matter what.
Yeah, you know, the casino is a good one in that, I was fortunate or unfortunate enough to have been the chair during that year, and we were really trying to navigate through a process that recently had been established by the legislature.
That no other city had gone through.
Yeah, we were the first to have to navigate through that. I was happy to have been through that chair position and navigated in such a way that there wasn't any of that sniping back and forth of those philosophical differences. You know, clearly 2 members were more in favor of it. I was against it for a lot of reasons, in part because I just frankly didn't believe the casino and didn't believe some of the consultants they had hired. But that said, I think at the end of the day, it wasn't going to improve the quality of life. It wasn't going to help us get more kids into MIT or Harvard. It wasn't going to help us in a lot of different areas. It wasn't going to improve our hospital system. And when
No, actually, that would have had a negative impact, I think, on the hospital.
And
And they weren't willing to contribute, Al, to that either.
Even in their own numbers, they talked about 100,000 visitors a day, or 1 million visitors a year, rather.
It's actually hard to believe that we're 3 years later. That might just be opening right now, had it been approved.
Right. We'd be looking at what the equivalent is of the Lowell connector on 495. We'd be talking about an enterprise who frankly couldn't pay their bills. When we look at Springfield, they haven't even put shovel in the ground, and they're already clawing back to the municipality and the state trying to renegotiate what they had promised going in.
And in the meantime, the 2 tribes together in Connecticut are now talking about putting one right over the border.
That's correct.
So that people don't go there.
Plain Ridge is nowhere near meeting the expectations of its revenue projections. And since that time, Taunton was awarded a license with the Wampanoag Indians, so 33 miles down the road, not only would you have Plain Ridge, which I think is 18 miles down the
Right.
road, but you have 33 miles down the road a destination casino again.
Right.
You know, I think, I think revenue in the state, you know, the challenges with revenue, sometimes legislators look for quick fixes. I think the casinos are absolutely one of those, and nowhere is that model robust and healthy.
Well, I think it's
anywhere
okay.
Anywhere in the country.
Anywhere in the
Well,
country.
you know, it's okay if you have 2 in Las Vegas and 2 in Atlantic City, but when you put one 30 miles apart in every state across the country, something's got to give.
And you also look at New Hampshire, Maine, and different areas. We know New York is springing up casinos all over the place. But we know that New Hampshire and Maine are also looking at ways to generate revenue, and casinos is one of the options they're looking at. Eventually you get to saturation of market. Now, the real problem I had with it, besides traffic, water, some of the basic infrastructure issues, is I had a real concern that the town could become dependent upon revenues, that at least projected revenues, because any contract
That would
you sign-
disappear.
Right, any contract that you sign with anybody is, you know, the amount of money they're going to pay you is always based on future anticipated revenues.
Right.
If they're not realized, you can't get them. Now, you can buy a fire truck, you can expand your police and fire, you can do a lot of things, but at the end of the day, if those revenues aren't there,
You gotta
you're
let those
laying
people- you
off
own it.
people
Right.
that are Milford citizens. You're laying off neighbors. You're laying off people that, you know, become dependent upon what was anticipated for revenues, and that's not a good thing for communities to
Well,
go
it would
through.
have had a, I think, over the long haul, also would have had an impact on local small businesses.
Absolutely.
A dramatic impact. And one of the things that Milford is really strong in is local, family-owned small businesses. The big box store, and we have some big box stores.
We do, yeah.
But generally speaking, you know, it's the foundation of Milford is a small mom and pop thing.
You're right. You're right. Like to see more of that.
Multi-generational.
Yeah, and so what happens is that, you know, generally speaking, the big box stores come in, they drive the small stores out, and then bingo, bango, then you have no choice. But if you look at Milford, and because of the business we're in, you see a lot of small business, mom and pops, that are still around, that haven't been impacted by the
Yeah,
big
you
box.
look at the Olivas, you look at Jeans at Water Street, you look at the Leoch family
Right.
down on 140.
Right.
Yeah, you look at the Spallone family. I could go on and
Right.
on talking
Right.
about small businesses,
Businesses that are still-
multi-generational.
Still healthy.
Yeah, and they're the lifeblood of a community.
Right, and without question, and the big reason that people don't realize it is because not only do they have a business in town, but they live in town. They've been part of the community, and so they understand not only the needs of the community, but they know political issues.
Sure.
So they're really in tune with it. Where the big box stores, believe me, they could, you know, they could care less.
And all the people running those businesses, when you look back, are not transplants, as you said. They're Milford High graduates.
Yep.
They're nurses. They're a lot of things, and their families associated with school system. You'll leave a family in the school system and the
I
school
mean,
food system.
if you just start looking at those businesses that are here, you know, for more than one generation, you know they're all Milford-born people.
You're right, right.
And they're engaged in the philanthropic community also.
You're right.
And that's what makes Milford so exciting. I mean, look at the hospital. Just look at no one would have ever expected this emergency room to be as large as, and relatively speaking, Milford Hospital has become an island, relatively speaking, to other, because it's a small, you know, it's a wholly owned
The
nonprofit.
lieutenant governor actually at the chamber basically singled that out and said, we have the Boston medical community, and then you have Milford Hospital.
Yeah, I
Then
think
you
it's
have-
it's a gem.
Then you
Right.
have the UMass Medical Center, and then you're all the way out to Springfield. But
Right.
she said, basically, you've built this thing, that west of Boston, that's it.
And look
Does
what
it-
it does for our community of Milford. Not only do we benefit from great hospital services, there's certainly a culture there
Right.
within that building, within that management, within those employees that provide great service to our community.
And
in
not
terms
just
of
that, but you're
healthcare.
getting, you know, Brian Murray likes to talk about the medical economic community coming. You've got on the opposite corner where they're going to tear down, I can't remember whose florist it was, but tear down that White House, and they're building a 3-story medical building. You've got a new medical building going up where Robertson's Carpet was. You've got
Yeah.
all these doctors' offices and things starting to be built around
Yeah,
there.
that provide specialized service, whether it's dialysis centers,
Right,
whether
and now
it's
you're, yeah, and now
cardio.
you're
Right.
starting to see the ancillary services built
bet.
around those.
Which will make Milford even more of a destination. And what happens is that we talked about the tax rate, the business tax rate, and businesses, intelligent businesses, understand that increased tax rate helps them because it encourages people to be engaged and be part of Milford,
Right.
which brings business to them.
Right.
So it's a symbiotic kind of thing where everybody wins.
Well, I think the demand and the pressure on leadership within government is certainly to provide that benefit back to
The
businesses.
vision.
Well, it's in part vision. We talk about making sure that we're business friendly. We talk about ways in which the people in the town hall can find ways and pathways to yes, as opposed to the easy no's. That's what I'd like to see. I'd like to see people that and make sure we maintain a culture within our town hall that I'm not sure completely exists right now. That from the time somebody answers the phone and says good morning and says their name, it's a different environment when businesses walk into a community and have the right type of people assisting them to get to where they need to be.
When someone says that can be done, but this is how we have to
Or
get
how can I help you, as opposed
How
to
can I
we
help
don't
you?
allow that.
how can I help you get there?
You can tell, and we can tell. If we call a town hall, you can call 50 town halls. If you call town hall and you hear engineering, you're in one environment. When somebody answers the phone and says, "Hi, this is Sam," or "This is Bob," "This is engineering. How can I help you?"
Different story.
Much different story. It's a much different culture, and when you see best practices and examples of great businesses, you go to the hospital as an example, as one example, but there are many around where people are happy to help you. They're cheerful. They
like
enjoy
working there.
coming into work every day. That's the type of environment you hope to create.
Well, as time goes on, I think Milford has that spirit. I think Milford has that. I mean, there's always that.
It does have it.
I mean,
I agree
there's
with
always that little flares of personality. But generally speaking, I think Milford has much envied municipal organization. Much envied.
Bill, we got only a couple of minutes left. You've covered your goals. We've talked a little bit about the town. Do you have any comments on the state reps race going on? Right now, it looks like Brian Murray will be running unopposed for the seat that John Fernandez is vacating. Any thoughts on it?
Yeah, I think it's important for us to have the right leadership in the right place. I think I'll let those politics play themselves out a little bit. I think for the most part, people have asked me if I'm interested, for example, and frankly, I think this is more geared for lawyers, and specifically because you can hang your shingle, you can work for clients in the time that you're not in session at the State House. For the most part, formal sessions are Wednesdays in the State House. There's an awful lot of time that can be devoted to clients, if you're an attorney, as an example, where it's not really geared for businesses or people that are in business working for somebody else. It'd be hard for me to go to my employer at Bose and say, "Hey, I'm going to be in Boston every Wednesday," or "I'm going to be doing constituent services." There's an awful lot of that as well.
Okay. Well, we're out of time, but Bill, thanks for stopping by.
It's a pleasure, and thanks for having me.
Our pleasure.
Thanks.